Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode from Page to Stage. I'm your host, Wendy Corner, and this podcast is for you if you are an entrepreneur. Yes, Page and Stage come together in entrepreneurship. Now, you may be thinking, how does that work then? Well, if you are an entrepreneur, you will maybe have a solo book out, maybe have a contributory book out. You may have a regular blog. But you're going to have socials, aren't you? And what's that if it's not published work? I want to expand your thoughts on this one. And then what about the stage thing? Because a lot of people come to me going, oh, I'm shy, I'm nervous, I can't possibly do all this public speaking thing. And my response is, can you have a one-on-one conversation with somebody? Yeah. Then you can do a podcast just like we're doing now. So that's your cue. Get on podcasts, share your information with the world. Right, that said, I'm excited today. Oh, I have the joy and pleasure of introducing you to Rosemary Olender. Have I said that right?
Olender.
Olender. Sorry, I knew I was going to mess it
Okay.
up. Rosemary Olender. Now, I know about this much of Rosemary because we've had a couple of conversations, but she knows an awful lot more about herself than I do. So, Rosemary, I'm going to pass the buck over to you and say, give us a bit of an introduction. Who are you? How did you get to where you are now?
Okay. As you know, my name is Rosemary Olender. I am an educator, author of two nonfiction books, and I have spent probably the last 20 years consulting with school districts and families around the state of New York, and working with kids in school classrooms. So, having said all that, my background is a speech pathologist, teacher of the deaf, and I became an administrator for the last 14 years of my formal work load. And what happened was, and how I ended up here, most of my teaching career and administrative career was on inclusive education and how to bring students with disabilities and behavior problems into regular classrooms and make it work, and work with teachers on how to teach diverse learners in the classroom. In 1991, my father passed away, and the night before he died, I was sitting with him in the hospital, and he said to me, I want to apologize to you. And I said, for what? And he said, for leaving you and your sister with nothing. Well, I'm not usually speechless. I'm never speechless. I was pretty speechless at that point. And then I pulled it together and said, Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. Tony and I are two of the richest people on earth, and we feel like we won the lottery the day we were born to you and Mom. And he said, I don't understand, because we have no money in the bank. Our house does not have a marketable value. We don't have a new car. I said, Dad, those are not the things that make people rich. The gifts you have given us over the years are what has made us incredibly rich. And he said, I don't understand. And I said, well, let me explain it to you. So I spent the next probably 40 minutes going through with him some of the things I thought that made me who I am and made me as successful as I felt I was. Was I rich? No. We came from a lower middle class family in a small town that was very dichotomous. It had a lake crowd with people who owned a lot of the businesses in the city and the factories. And so they were very wealthy. And then there were the city kids who worked in those factories who had small businesses like my dad. But in school, I was involved and immersed in both groups, particularly kids who came from the lake. We called them the lake crowd, and got to be good friends with them. So from my growing up with a family that really instilled character value.
Yeah.
Um, I got to observe the differences between families that did work on that and families that thought more about things. I mean, I had friends who had their own car at 16. They
Yes.
had, the first iPhone that ever came out. I'm sure. I was beyond high school at that point, but even in college. And in college, I got to see the same thing. Kids who came from very wealthy families, kids who came, that were on scholarships or stipends to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So my conversation with my dad really revolved around those gifts that he showed us, demonstrated, talked with us about. So that led me to write a book. Now, my father died 30 years ago. So people say, how did it take you so long? Well, from 1991 until 2003, I was totally immersed in being a teacher and then a building administrator and then a district administrator. So I didn't have any time, but during that time, I had a journal and I would just jot down because the idea of doing that book was so important to me.
It
Um,
wouldn't let you go, would it?
no, no, but in a way, it kept my dad close to me,
Yes.
because I kept thinking back. So I wrote this book, and the book is called Coffee and Wisdom: A Father's Legacy to Leading a Rich Life. And it is about the non material gifts that children need to grow up to be rich. And what do I mean by rich? Resilient, independent, caring, and happy, all leading to success. So
Oh,
the
hang on
book,
a minute. Resilient, independent, caring,
caring
and
and happy.
happy. Oh, I detect an acronym there.
Yes, you do. And you can,
Aha!
yes, and you can thank Mr. Butwin because he's gotten me onto this acronym thing because it's easy to remember, you
Yes, of
know.
course. Audience, if
Um,
you haven't picked it up, that word spells rich. Just
okay.
in case.
So anyway, I wrote the book when COVID hit
Right.
because what else was I going to do? So I
Yes.
said, this is the time to do this. And it started out as just a sort of tribute to my father.
Uh-huh.
But after beta readers read it, and then some of my friends asked for a copy and read it, and then some strangers read it, the consistent message across the board was this is a message that needs to get out to families,
Mhm.
especially in today's culture,
Yeah.
globally, of
Yes.
such divisiveness and such anger and such cruelty. This book needs to get out there. So that's why I'm doing podcasts, and that's why I'm trying to get on stages and maybe do some counseling with families and parents who would like to just get some ideas. So
Yeah.
anyway, back to the book, and stop me if I'm talking too much because
Fine. That's
that's
fine. No,
me.
no, no, because I mean that's given us a wonderful introduction. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I do love the acronym RICH in there. I want to take you back in time for a minute. When
Okay.
did you get the idea that writing was something that you were good at, you enjoyed? And I mean, I know we started the mechanics of it all around the same time, and you as an educator are well familiar with that. My
Mhm.
question is, how early in life did you discover that writing was something that you enjoyed?
Probably in high school. I recall, of all things, and it's like I'm there. Um, I had to take the SAT for college, so I probably was a junior in high school,
So that was how
and
old? This audience is international. We don't all know the American
um,
system.
I probably was about 17,
Okay.
16, going on
Mhm.
17,
Mhm.
and I had to write an essay. And I did not like the titles they gave us. I looked at them and thought, these are just really boring. And then the last thing was, or anything else you want to write about.
Oh, excellent.
So I thought, well, what do I want to write about? And in front of me on the wall was a beautiful poster of the ocean. And on the bottom was a quote from Tennyson that said, I am a part of all that I have met. And that just resonated with me because that was a theme my father taught me, that you are where you come from and you are where you go. That is the whole of you. So my essay, I wrote that essay. And to this day, I think that essay is what got me into the college I went to, because I was never a good test taker. So the rest of the test was not all that good. I was a terrible multiple choice taker.
Really?
I would always read too much into two answers. So that would get me into trouble. But anyway, so I think from there, and then when I worked with the deaf, and the deaf have significant language delays because they can't hear the language.
Yes.
So I ended up rewriting, because in those days they didn't have alternative materials for kids. And we're talking way back now. I ended up rewriting stories and doing thematic summaries of a lot of them. And I enjoyed doing that. And then I kind of got away from doing any personal writing. It was all professional writing with grants I had to write and those kinds of things, until I retired in 2003 and put together my first book, which was called The School Home Connection: Forging Positive Relationships with Parents.
Oh, I bet that came from some experience.
It did. And it came from actual research too.
Right.
For the book, a friend and I decided, she was a director of special education in another district, and I was a director of special education in mine. And we decided to interview some parents who were very unhappy with the school. We would meet them at the CSE table, our table to discuss their children and what their children needed. And we deliberately sat with parents who were not happy with the school, legal representatives who had threatened to sue us. We actually asked if we could meet with them.
Yes.
And we did a cause analysis. What was driving them to dislike? What were the common themes? And so we came up with that. So in the book, we said to administrators and teachers, these are the things you want to do to establish positive relationships. These are the things you don't ever want to do, because you will destroy the trust between you and the family. And then that makes the teaching harder, and it doesn't help the kid. So that was my first book. And then around the state, I did a lot of writing for workshops that I was doing with teachers on how to bring in diverse learners in the classroom and teach to kids who could read and couldn't read in a classroom. What do you do with the kids who can't read? That kind of thing. So that's my sort of my background of where my writing got from.
So it's all been nonfiction. It's all been kind of technical, kind of experience based, along with the theory to back.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank
you. Well, obviously, I mean, as an educator, you've done an awful lot of speaking. Tell us about your speaking journey.
Okay. Well, the speaking journey now is about this book. Yeah. And the book is structured so that each chapter is a different gift that my father gave us. And they were things like the gift of time and acceptance, the gift of trust and integrity, the gift of humor, the gift of perspective, the gift of positive risk taking, those kinds of things.
That's a biggie, isn't it? Because
yes, it is. Because if you want,
go on.
Yeah, because if you're right, because if you want a child to be confident, they have to be willing to take some risks. They will be willing. Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of where I went in the book. In each chapter, I talk about why that gift is important for the child, what it does, and what it does for the relationship between you and your child. And then I list several reflections back on how my dad presented that or showed it or talked about it or gave it to us. And then the third section of each chapter are some suggestions for parents. Here are some things you might want to try. You're probably doing some of them, maybe all of them, or you might tweak something you're doing to say, oh, I can add that. That would be a good idea. So that's how the book is set up. Um,
Yeah. So, I
and
mean, so with the speaking, sorry, I'm going to come back to the book in a minute,
sure,
but with your speaking journey, as I said, you were obviously going to be in front of classrooms.
correct.
Were you lecturing as well?
I would do two things. I went around the state of New York from 2004 to till COVID. And what
Right.
I would do is I would go to districts and I would do special education audits of their district. That's kind of what drew me into them. And I
Okay.
would talk with the district about compliance with federal and state law concerning students with disabilities.
Mhm.
But then that always led, I ended up being in districts for a couple weeks. It led to me going into classrooms and observing the kids and observing what was happening in the classrooms, and then to full faculty and or parent workshops. So I
Right.
would do a full day workshop for staff,
Mhm.
and a half day workshop for parents. So that's kind of where my speaking journey took me then.
Yeah, the reason I'm
Post COVID,
mentioning
everything.
this, the reason I'm mentioning this is because, audience, if you're not aware, I mean, I mentioned in the introduction that speaking on a podcast is a stage. There are lots of different stages, and they each have a discrete package of skills required. They're all interchangeable, but there is a discrete package of skills required. So what I'm hearing from you, Rosemary, is that workshop was your sweet spot in terms of most of
It
the work that
was.
you've done.
During that time, it was.
Yeah.
And
And now, of course, it's different.
right, prior to that, when I was administrating, obviously it was faculty meetings
Yes.
and parent meetings,
Yes.
PTA meetings. So and interspersed with that, I spoke at national conferences and
Right.
state
So you did some
conferences.
keynoting in there as well.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
I did one keynote speech in New York City one time. There were too many people for the room. There were 200 people. And I quickly agreed to do a second session because there were a lot of people who can come in. And that was on the first book. That was on the homeschool relation.
Whoa.
So,
Congratulations. If you got standing room only, that's really
yeah,
cool.
that was nice. That was very gratifying.
Yeah.
So now, my goal is to do podcasts that will let parents and families and educators and anyone working with kids
Mm.
know that I would be happy to and would love to um, do a workshop for them, do a virtual seminar like you and I are doing right now,
Yeah.
and talk with them about things, do a Zoom virtual meeting, one-to-one counseling, one-to-one
Something.
consulting with families.
Mhm.
I'm going to approach school districts, PTAs, parent teacher associations. And next week, so there's a lot of speaking stages. Next week, I'm doing a book club in my community here in Florida, which is all senior citizens. So it's going to be addressed to grandparents and grandparents working, with their grandchildren and other children, and how valuable ageism is for kids. So that's kind of exciting. I did one book talk in my hometown, and there were over 100 people there. And that was in December, early December. And that was fun because a lot of my reflections were sites in the city. And, people knew what I was talking about, but there were a lot of new people there too. But that was fun. So that was another
It is
stage.
fun when you can make that connection with people in the audience and you can see light bulbs going on, isn't it? It's tremendous.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
absolutely adore the idea of getting the grandparents involved because uh, we've gone away to a certain extent from the extended family in one area
Right.
because so many families are dispersed now. Gone are the days when you live next door to your granny and your auntie lived over there and your uncle was there and the cousins were behind you.
Right.
So we had that extended family support. But now we live in an age where so many families are dispersed quite literally around the world.
Correct.
And
Hmm.
you don't have that same level of support as a parent that you used to
Right.
have. So the grandparents are really essential. Yeah.
Right. They're critical. I mean, post-COVID, we've become a virtual world, which
Yes,
makes it a
yes,
little bit easier to make those connections. But I also talk with parents and families about the idea that, your family is those you were born with and those you choose. And it's
yes.
important to choose a support network for children, even if it's only the school and some of the people that you meet as a mom and a PTA or a dad and a PTA,
Hmm.
so that the kid feels like it's bigger than just their own home.
Yes.
And again, that just lends to security. But the reality, you're right. The reality is the demands on today's family are overwhelming.
Mm.
And, there's a demand for more time. There's a demand for more money. There's a demand for more resources, more information, heck, more everything. And yet, families today are feeling more disjointed and disconnected than ever. And recent studies have come out that show that the number of college students taking antidepressants has doubled in the last decade. Doubled. So we need to give individuals fortitude to deal with the resiliency part of Rich is the key,
Mm.
because we're getting bombarded all the time by situations that come up, and we need to show kids and people to realize that it's okay if bad stuff happens, but you got to learn from it. You got to make sure it doesn't happen again. And there are ways to make it not a positive, but to make it an opportunity to learn.
Yes, yes,
And that's what
absolutely.
it is.
I'm interested to see how the stats stack up over the next few years, because I think we're only just beginning 6 years post-pandemic, that we're beginning to see the mental health sequelae, because those children were going through school, they were isolated, screen dependent, and those interpersonal skills. Excuse me, audience, this is a speechy to a speechy here moment, okay? But if you hadn't worked out, I'm also a speech therapist by training, so this is where we'll do a little bit of interplay. That interpersonal relationship stuff got lost for so long, and
Correct.
it may not have been that long in an adult's life, but in a growing child's life, it felt interminable. And
Right.
when you had
Yes.
half of the face covered up as well,
Right.
it,
And they couldn't, half of the communication was lost. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm curious to see what comes down the track in
Right.
terms of the
Hmm.
stats on the mental health,
Hmm.
because I think we're only just beginning to see the results of that. But yeah, so the other thing I was going to pick up on was your in the modern age is the need for time and attention. And we're back to those screens again, aren't we?
Yes.
As an observation, I spend a lot of time in airports, and we witnessing families sitting down together having a meal, and every single one of them, including the little bubs, are on screens. And I'm
Absolutely.
thinking,
If there was one thing I could change, it would be to, I would love to see what would happen if we did away with phones. Now, interestingly enough, my home school district in Syracuse, New York, has banned phones in the schools. Kids
yes,
cannot have them.
yes,
They can bring them in, and they're put in a central place. And I asked my two grandchildren who are in high school now how that was going. I said, "How's it going without your phones?" And my 14-year-old said, "You know, we talk more now."
duh,
Really? Yeah,
figure.
yeah. Time and attention means full attention. It means communicating eye to eye. It means developing conversational skills. And parents will say to me, "Well, what are three things I should be doing?" Well, first, you need to be observing very, very consistently. pay attention and watch what your kids are excited about, what they're distressed about, what they're worried about, what they're scared of from when they're little. I've had some parents say, well, my kid's only a toddler. No, 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 no. They learn from you. Parenting is a journey. It's not a destination. And like any journey, it has its ups and its downs. It has its roadblocks. It has its dead ends. It has its exciting finds, all of that. And I would hope that I could help parents relax a little and understand there's no perfection to it. And you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But acknowledge those mistakes. If you make a mistake with your kid, say so. I'm sorry I snapped at you. I was worried about grandma, and I wasn't really thinking clearly. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that.
Yes.
That kind of thing, just common courtesy. So observation consistently is really important. The second thing is to listen actively. And when you listen actively, that means you're focused on what you're listening to, not half watch TV or look at my phone and sort of hear the conversation over here, and, my dad would do that. My father he never said, not now. If I went to him and had a problem and he knew when I was approaching him, he never said, not now. He might say, give me a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And he would finish what he was doing, and then he'd say, okay. But he always sat down eye to eye with me. Yeah. See, the book is called Coffee and Wisdom because it was going to be called Conversations Over Coffee. But I did the legacy part because of my conversation with him the night before he passed. It's called Coffee and Wisdom because my entire life from when I was little, my dad and I would sit at the kitchen table at night and have conversations. And I mean conversations, not how was school good? Oh, okay. It would be like, how was school today? And I'd say, it was okay. Why was it just okay? What happened? What happened that really excited? What'd you learn today that you want to share with me? Yes. And then he'd say, let me tell you something I learned today. It was like, with my dad, it was always like peeling an onion and getting deeper and deeper into the conversation. So I learned very early, and I'm talking elementary school, to critically think.
How old is elementary school?
Elementary school for us would be 5 to 10.
Okay.
5 to kindergarten to about 4th grade. Then it becomes middle school. So I was probably in 2nd, 3rd grade when he would press, and not press, but just sort of take apart what I was saying and just, niggle it a little bit. Yes. Yeah. And so we would sit at that table every night during the week and sometimes on weekends. And he would say early on, I've got cookies or crackers. Would you like a glass of milk? I'm going to have coffee. When I turned 12, I said, I want coffee. I started drinking coffee at age 12 and every night. And you know what? The night before he passed away, before he said to me, I want to apologize to you, he said to me, go get your coffee and come back and sit down. So coffee was an integral sort of opener.
An anchor, really, wasn't it? Yes.
Yes, it was. It was very much an anchor. And when he was so sick and I was away from him, we would talk at night on the phone. We would just talk on the phone at night and maybe not as long. And in the book, there's a piece I wrote when I was a teacher, when I was a school principal, and my teachers were going through a writing course. I decided to take it as well from our writing director, our director of ELA. And she did a wonderful job. And I wrote this piece called Conversations Over Coffee. And it was about the repetitive through the years from when I was very little all the way up to at that time, he was very ill. And I had had a conversation with him the night before on the phone. And the refrain was always my mother saying, hey, you two, she's got to go to school. You got to go to work. Enough, go to bed. Because sometimes we would sit for hours. We'd finish a pot of coffee and a box of crackers, So that time was so critical. Now, parents today might not have that time, and that's okay. It's not the amount of time, it's the quality. It's what you're doing. And if you establish a routine of reflection and conversation with your kids, for example, if you said to your kid, I had a mom who was really busy, and she said, the only time I see my kids is walking them to school in the morning and putting them to bed at night, because she was a lawyer and she was very crazy busy. So I said to her, well, okay, how about when you walk them to the bus, you say to them, during the day, I want you to pick out 3 things that happened to you that you want to talk to me about, or you're willing to tell me about. And when you come home, you tell me what those are, and I will do the same. And then at night, you can, before they go to bed, you can say, okay, here's my 3 things. This upset me, this excited me, and this is something I'm a little worried about. And talk about the feelings of what you go through. Let them know it's normal to be worried. It's normal to be scared. Because, the third thing that parents have to do, I said there were 3: observing, listening. The third thing is parents have to model. Yes. They have to model carefully. And it's not always easy. Like I said, you make mistakes. So you say, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said those. That was a bad word I used. I shouldn't have used it. And I mean bad in terms of inappropriate at the time. It didn't fit the situation. So, you need to model, because your kids are learning from you all the time. They're watching, they're listening. If you're
and if I can interject for a second, you're actually stating exactly, specifically what it is you're apologizing for.
Yes.
Because then you're identifying what the misappropriation was, so that the child knows that's what you're talking about, not a general all-purpose, I messed up. Because if I can mess up everything, I mess up one thing, but I have no model for the specifics. Therefore, if I mess up on one thing, the world has fallen down. Yeah.
Right. And that's another thing my dad always told us. It's not a mistake if you learn from it.
Yes.
And you don't repeat it, or you adjust it so that it'll work the next time. It can be an opportunity to learn. So and then he would talk about some of the best mistakes he ever made, but so that was critical. The other thing that I think we need, I think in the global reality of what's going on, we need more humor. We just need more humor. And my father was brilliant at using humor to diffuse really hard, tough situations. I recant a story in the book where my uncle, he was a very proud man, and he finally was able to buy a brand new car instead of a used car. So he bought a brand new car. And he probably washed that thing 3-4 times a week. So summer comes, and we have a drought. There's no water. There's no rain. So the mayor says, please don't water your grass. Don't wash your cars. We've got to buckle up for a little bit. Well, my uncle was beside himself. So my father has the brilliant idea, well, why don't we take the car and we'll go down to the Mohawk River, which went through our city. He said, and we can park the car and take buckets of water and just use buckets of water and get the real grime and dirt off. And my uncle said, yeah, that's a good idea. So off they go. And they get there, and my uncle decides, the road's way up here. Let's just back the car down a little bit towards the river. So he does that. And my father says, okay. So my father jumps out, and my uncle, puts the car in park, and he jumps out, and he forgot to put the emergency brake on. So the car rolled down the bank, and the back end went smack into the river. Not totally, but at the edge. So the trunk was in the water. And my uncle started to yell and scream. And my father started laughing. My uncle tells me this story. He goes, I look at your father, and he is doubled over in laughter, which made me madder. And I'm like, what are you laughing at? And my father said, I'm laughing at your reaction. And I was like, well, why shouldn't I react this way? And my father said, well, it doesn't help anything. He goes, the reality is, Joe, we have the availability of a tow truck. We'll pull it out and we'll wash it. It'll be fine. And that's the kind of thing he did. I was helping him one time, and we lived in the second floor above my grandparents. And I was helping him put I probably was in junior high, maybe. And junior high would be probably 14, 13, 14. And I'm helping him put a window air conditioner in. And it slipped and went right out the window. Boom. Now we're on the second floor.
Uh-oh.
So my father sticks his head out and he goes, well, that puppy's dead. And I just burst out laughing. And I said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. He goes, why not? He goes, the good thing is nobody was under it. Nobody was down there, and we can clean it up, and we'll have to think about how we get another one, but it's okay. So his sense of humor has helped me in a lot of situations where I have been very angry or very hurt. And I'll say, well, if my father were here right now, what would he tell me? And I can almost hear his voice. And that's the legacy. See, that's the legacy parents need to leave their kids. They need to, what I'm trying to say is the greatest inheritance a kid can have is who they become.
Yes.
And if they see you being kind and compassionate, they'll be kind and compassionate. And not just with those people and not with those people. That doesn't work. That's a message that is confusing. It's like, if you're kind, you're kind. And if I'm not suggesting that you be kind to somebody who's trying to hurt you. That's different. And my father would say that. He would say, if you are not in immediate physical danger, and he would say, you have no right to hurt yourself or anyone else ever, ever. That's just not acceptable behavior. And I can remember him telling me that when I pushed a kid down when we were, 3 and 4 years old. I can remember him saying, you don't have the right to hurt anybody, and nobody has the right to hurt you. So remember that. So those are the
Going back to that legacy, that sort of modeling thing. My mother, I was 4 at the time, and the family friends were the mother had an accident. She'd been in a lab explosion, so she had a skin graft on her face, and she had a prosthesis. So she was the only person, prosthetic leg. She was the only person I knew who had an automatic car. Because I'm looking at this and going, I've only got 2 pedals. My car has 3. What's going on here? Anyway, that was part of it. But she also had a daughter with Down syndrome. And I remember going for afternoon tea. The mat was laid out on the floor, and we had both the pretend tea set and the real thing. And I was playing with Laura. But I realised there was something slightly different. I didn't say anything at the time, but on the way home, I said to Mum, Laura's different. And she said, yeah, she is. What's going on? I couldn't really understand what she said, and she's a bit clumsy. And yes, but like Laura, she likes to play. Like you, Laura likes to play. Like you, Laura likes to have friends. And Mum modelled the inclusivity, the similarity there.
Absolutely.
And that stayed with me at an unconscious level. Which particular group did I opt to specialise in my speech pathology career? Those with intellectual disability and or autism. So that modelling at a very early age really stayed with me. And that respect for everyone, regardless of who they are. So absolutely, I thoroughly agree with the modelling thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things my father taught me when I would have reactions to differences or reactions to somebody's behavior is that in the chapter on empathy, I think, he would say things like, we think we can walk in someone else's shoes, and we can intellectualize it. But unless we've walked their path to this moment, we don't know what they're dealing with and why they're behaving the way they're behaving.
Yes.
So you want to at least give it a chance to sort of go through in your head what might have been happening. And he said, suppose we had a ticker tape across our forehead, and you see somebody kicking a car just really hard, and they seem to be very upset, and you'd say, oh, that guy's mentally ill. There's some, you put your judgments on it. And then he turns around, and on his forehead is, my doctor just told me I have cancer. Would you feel the same? Would you think the same? Would you react the same if you knew all of that? And, of course not. So, perspective is kind of important. And they say that traveling is the antidote to bigotry. And it is. And I think my father encouraged, he could never do it because we never had the money, but he made me promise, the two things he made me promise that night before I left and never talked to him again because he passed the next morning. He said, promise me that you will travel when you can and as often as you can, and you will go to places and meet different people, because it will just open up doors for you that you don't even know you have. So I said, okay, I can do that. And the second thing he said is, and promise me you will retire from this job that keeps you 12 hours, 14 hours a day, and enjoy your life doing something that benefits others and really helps out there. And I said, sure. So that's what I did.
You are.
Yeah.
Following the promises that you've given your father. Lovely.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, I want you, promise me you'll retire the very day you can and not wait. And I did do that. I did do that. Even though I could have waited, I was enjoying what I was doing, but I thought, no, I promised him I would do that. There's got to be something else there. And then even before I actually retired, a few days before I retired, somebody called me wanted me to do an interim director of special ed for a district because they were in trouble and they needed some help. And I said, sure. And that started my next 19 years. That was the next stage. And now I'm into this third stage. What really surprises me, Wendy, is that many of the people who have read the book have said to me, wow, I didn't have that. I didn't have a parent who asked me how I felt about something. I didn't have someone to say, it's okay to make mistakes if
you learn from them.
You learn from it. You've tried your best and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, there's just so much to pay attention to, and parents are struggling, and the connections need to be there. Find a time to put the phones down. We don't allow phones at dinner.
Oh, no.
Not allowed. Not allowed. And one time I went to lunch with my daughter and my grandson, and I said, I'll take you to lunch. So we go to lunch. My daughter took her phone. And I said, put that away. And she said, well, I said, if you touch it, you're paying the bill. You're taking me to lunch. So it's just
we actually did that with staff nights out, where there would be 10 plus people 10 plus of the team there. And it was as we sat down, is anybody here got sick kids at home? No, right. Phones not just completely away. And if anybody's phone goes off, you are fitting the bill, the whole 10 people. So you can imagine that was a very serious offense.
Yeah. I mean, I remember one time I was sitting in a restaurant in the Adirondacks. I was on a consulting gig and I was by myself. So I went to a restaurant. It was like a Wendy's or something. No, it was better than a Wendy's. Maybe a Pizza Hut or something.
Anything better than Wendy's?
Yeah. Right. And this woman came in, and she's on the phone, and she had 2 toddlers with her, and they did not have devices. It was before kids really got into the devices, but she had her cell phone. It was a bigger one then. And she sat there, she's talking as they come through the door, and she's barely noticing that the door almost hit her son in the head. And he's little. They were probably 3 and 7 or something. And I'm watching this. I love to people watch. And I'm just watching this. And she goes over and she sits down and she's still talking. And she kind of points to where they should sit, and they sit down. And the waitress came over and gave the kids little boxes of crayons and a thing for them to write on. And she leaves, and the mom is talking and talking and talking. But five minutes went by, and I was getting agitated. I was like, the language opportunities that are being missed at this table are incredible. And so I watched, and the little girl finished something, and she was like, "Mommy, look at this. Mommy, look at this." And she's totally ignoring her daughter. And she's like, "Not now, not now." Well, after about 15 minutes, I got up and I went over to the table and I said, "Excuse me." She's still on the phone. And I said, "Excuse me." I said, "I'm a teacher and I'm all by myself and I'm kind of lonely. Would you mind if I just sat with your kids and talked with them while you're on your important phone call?" And she said, "Well, I'm almost done." And I said, "Are you sure? Because I'd be happy to sit with them." And she said, "That's fine." So I went back to him. I said,
Did she
"Okay, but
stop the call?
yeah, she did." I said, "I'll be right over there if you need me." But she stopped the call and sat there with her kids. But I don't know if I do that today. Today's a little harder,
Yeah.
harsher. I don't know what the reaction would be, but it makes me crazy. It makes me crazy when I see 5 teens in my living room and they're all on their phones and they're not talking to each other.
Well, you
And
might find they're actually texting each other. And you
yes,
go,
they are.
"Look,
Yeah.
look, look, you're here. Connect, talk."
Yes. Yeah. And I've had parents say or ask, "Well, what if my child's only 3?" I said, "Well, then you sit on the floor and you make eye contact with them and you talk and you say, 'What color is this?' Or whatever you're doing. So that's, those are the kinds of things that are the book. And the goal for me now is to work with families that are really struggling with time and connections and say, "Okay, here's tweaking, here's some little things, that we can do."
Beautiful, beautiful. So you've given us a lovely lowdown on the book. Now, the book came out last year in 2025, didn't it?
Yes, it came out in April,
April
end
2025.
of April, end of April of 25. Yep.
Is it available in independent bookstores or only on Amazon?
It is I can't answer that. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Nobles, it's on Ex Libris, my publishing company,
Sure.
Books A Million
Yeah,
in
so people
Canada.
can find it. People can find it.
Yes, yes,
Audience, we'll make sure there's a link in the show notes so that you can go and find it because it's pretty powerful stuff, as you've already heard. Love it. Now, we've already kind of answered the question that I usually ask people is how do you embody your words when you take them from page to stage? You've talked about the importance of modeling and giving examples of what you're talking about, which is fabulous. So, okay, then, as we're winding up, Rosemary, what final words of wisdom can you give our audience?
I think I would say raising rich children is not about money. And we've had I've encountered so many families that have no money, little to no money, that feel that they're less than as a parent.
Yes.
And they're not. And they're not. The other thing I would encourage is make sure that you tell your kids how you feel about them, and make sure you tell your parents how you feel about them.
Yes.
Because I watched my father visibly relax as I was, because he really felt like a failure. And I thought, are you kidding me? It's almost like if you could see your funeral and what people say about you ahead of time,
Yes.
so that you can feel better about yourself. But we place so much on hustle culture and money that people feel, but it's not about money. My signature talk is on stage is put your wallets away and raise rich kids.
Yeah. The experiences, the time, the attention, the modeling, those are all invaluable. You cannot put a price tag on
No,
those.
you can. Yeah. And
Whereas an iPhone and a new car, yes, you can. However, that will disappear. But the legacy that you as a parent leave in your child, because you have spent that time, you've given them the attention, you've modeled well, that is simply priceless.
right. And if you can look at your kids and feel very proud of them as they're growing, that's a reflection on you.
Yes.
Think about what you have done to help create that individual, that person, you know. Um, you know, two easy things that parents can do on a daily basis that trust me will make a difference. The first thing, we talk about love and acceptance of your kid. And everybody knows, yeah, tell them you love them, all of that. Tell them you love them with your smile. When they walk in a room, smile wide. Let that smile reach your eyes. That's what I miss. I miss seeing that from my dad. And I had an uncle who would do that. When I would walk in, he would light up. And I can't tell you how it made me feel. Make your kids feel that. When they come home, when my father would not go to bed until I was home. Even as a teenager, if I came home at I had curfews,
Yes.
but if I came
Mhm.
home at midnight or 1 in the morning because it was a special dance or something, he was there waiting.
Mhm.
Um, and he would have a big smile on his face. And I can remember as a kid saying, "Why are you smiling at me?" And he'd say, "Because you're special and I love you. And why wouldn't I smile? I'm happy you're here." Those are the kinds of things your kids need to hear. So that's an easy fix. You got 2 seconds to do it, you know?
Mhm.
And another thing is find right now, think about your week. You schedule meetings, you schedule doctor's appointments, schedule a time to reflect and converse with your children. It might only be 10 minutes before everybody runs out the door in the morning, or it might be 30 minutes when they get home from school and before they start their homework, whatever. Find a time consistently and make it sacred so
Mhm.
that other things don't stop it from happening because it's so important that it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Non-negotiable. Mm.
Right.
Oh, thanks, Rosemary. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
Thank
Me
you.
too.
Thank you for sharing your from page to stage. For now, though, folks, bye from us.